Welcome back to another Beat the Bookie DFS Army live stream video and audio cast. I'm sitting here with my friend John Alesia.
Yes,
I got it
sir.
right this time.
You did.
AKA Statsational. I am Season Long Sez. Alan Seslowski, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. Early morning, ready to go.
People don't know that. If they're listening tomorrow, they're listening on their commute. But yeah, no, you look good in the morning, man. Did you just roll out of bed? I mean, you look pretty.
I did not just roll out of bed. It takes a lot more, and I make it look easy, but it takes a lot more than just rolling out of bed to look this good every day. So,
well, for those of you who are listening, John does have a very healthy head of hair, and
I do have good hair. That's my one good thing, man.
I gotta say, yeah, I have good feet. That's my thing because everything else is a mess on me.
But I hate feet. Are you one of those? Wait, are you one of those guys who wears like the sandals or something like that out at night to the bar? Are you one of those guys?
No, because I have this fear of glass cutting my feet. Because
that's my argument with these guys. I'm like,
yeah.
First of all, I hate it, but secondly, I'm like, people walk and step all over you, and you got glass on the floor. I'm like, wear closed shoes. This is and there's gonna be a ton of people out there who do this, and they're gonna be like, what are you talking about? I wear sandals out. Don't do it, man. Unless you're in a beach environment. You know, when you're in the middle of Manhattan, New York City, and you're wearing I'm like, come on, man, the thongs or whatever the hell these things are called.
Yeah,
flip-flops. I don't know what they are.
And especially in New York City, where there's all that like sludge water and the
curves. It's disgusting, man.
Yeah. Oh wow, we could do a whole podcast on that. Well, John, it's good to see you this morning. Last week we started this Beat the Bookie podcast, and just kind of as a conversation, you and I and our fearless leader, the Geek, were sitting around and said, hey, let's talk a little sports wagering. We love it. We're doing a lot of stuff in the VIP section, the Beat the Bookie section of the website, and we did this podcast, and it had
this touch all that stuff.
And we had an overwhelming response to it, where, you know what, we're going to do it again. So today, what were some of the feedback that you got in the Slack chat? Some of the questions specifically that you want to talk about today?
Well, first of all, I just my internet. I don't know if it was my internet or what. I knocked out, so I don't know if I missed anything that you said.
Nothing important.
A second ago. Okay, good. Yeah, but in the Slack, I had a few questions, and the response was positive, which was great. I appreciate all you guys listening and with the positive responses. And I'm trying to, hopefully the goal of this is that we'll answer some of your questions and give you a little bit more insight. So stuff that you've been thinking about or wondering about, or just basic questions. But my idea was, some of the questions I had were sort of maybe one step beyond what maybe having the base. So if you don't understand the base, just to give you, I was a kid, I was still in college, and I was interning at Wall Street. And so I was pretty good on the computer. I had spent the day, I was working all summer while I was off, so I understood the job fairly well. They brought in a new hire, a guy who was going to be full-time. I spent an entire day giving this guy a lesson on exactly what it was I do. And day two, I said, okay, now you do it. And he said, this is the floppy disk days. And he goes, and I said, okay, put the floppy disk in. And he goes, what's a floppy disk? And I said, oh shit, everything I just told this guy yesterday went right over his head. So I don't want to do that here.
Yeah, what you're saying is sometimes, we get into our expert world, and I do this with season-long fantasy football, and I start talking about like the second and third order layers of how to play a game, and I forget. Sometimes you have to go back to basics, but not basics like, crawling, but just basics, just review basic terminology. And a question that I know you've been getting a lot of is about when we talked about negative EV or positive EV players and games. So, for example, when you see a game and you see a plus 150 or a minus 110 next to it, can you talk a little bit about EV and what that means as an underdog and a favorite?
Yeah. So when we talk about EV, it's expected value. That's what it means. If anyone took a statistics class, you have certainly learned what expected value was. But in our world, you'll hear it thrown out, like you said, a lot of times where they're like, man, that playing that guy was a plus EV type of play. It was a plus expected value play. And they might not necessarily have the numbers backing that. Sometimes it's just something that we say where we're like, yeah, playing that guy in that situation was plus EV. But when you're sports betting, and I was referring to DFS in that situation, but when you're sports betting, EV, there is a way to calculate that. So let's kind of step back from sports betting for a second. And let's say we were just flipping a coin. We all know that the coin flip is a 50-50 proposition, right? So if someone was dumb enough to come up to you and say, hey, I'll pay you $10 every time we flip heads, and you owe me $5 every time we flip tails, like instinctively, you know, that's a really good bet. And you don't have to do the calculations in your head. But there is a calculation there, just how good of a bet it is and how much can I make over time making that bet. So in this instance, if it's a 50-50 proposition, okay, and I'm going to make $10 50% of the time, what we do is calculate 50% of the time, I'm plus $10. Okay, so that's a plus $5 on this particular bet. And then 50% of the time, I'm going to lose $5. That's a minus $250. So over time, I'm going to, every time we flip this coin, I'm going to make $250. And you say, well, I can't make $250 on one flip of the coin. The game's $10 or $5. And that's correct. But what's going to happen is over time, over 100 flips, 1,000 flips, we can anticipate we're going to get very close to the number of flips multiplied by the EV.
I got a question for you. So would this be tell me if I have it right. Is this a real life example? Like if I was okay, me who is a terrible shooter in basketball, I was a good screen setter, but I'm a terrible shooter. If I went against Steph Curry in a 3-point shooting contest, it's better for me to say, hey, let's do a 1 shot versus let's take 100 shots.
Exactly. So, and this actually works in, and you're using a sports example, and it works, in my opinion, on in real sports, in the NFL, in the NBA, where you've got, just think of,
John clipped out for 1 second. So while he said he was having some internet problems, but in the same time as what John was talking about is that if you're going to the number of spins, the number of flips, the number of times that hey John, you cut out for a second. So if you can't hear him, that's okay. We're going to keep moving along here. And for that, but anyway, the number of spins that you take, the number of oh, there you go.
I'm back. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I'll tell you where you got cut off. It was right after I gave the Steph Curry example, and what I was telling the people while you cut out was the number of chances, the number of spins, the number of flips is what really makes the difference.
Yes. So yes, exactly. So like I was about to say, when you have a real life sports example, it's why the NCAA tournament, they talk about it's a one and done. Anyone could win, because that's true. And especially in basketball, on any given day. Yep. That's right. Any given Sunday, one team can win. And I talk about this all the time, how the playoffs in professional sports do not tell you who the best team was. For most sports, the regular season can tell you like the Nationals are not better than the Astros. They may win this series, but the Astros proved they were the best team in baseball this year. Okay. People argue when the Giants beat the Patriots. I said the Giants, and they did it twice. But when the Patriots were, 17-0, they were the best team. They just lost on that day. They lost on the wrong day. So I look at sports as a probability, and I say, okay, this game is going to happen 60% of the time. This team is going to win, but 40% of the time they're going to lose. So when they do lose, even though they were the better team, that was their 4 out of 10 chance to lose. So yes, as you said, when we talk about EV, if you are in a negative EV situation, then yes, you want to play that game as little as possible. Whatever the game is that we're playing, you have a better chance of winning. Over time, you have absolutely no chance. In
the example, again, to bring it back to something that I can kind of visualize in my head, if I'm in a 3-point, Season Long Sez is in a 3-point contest with Steph Curry, I'm better off with 1 shot than if we do 100 shots, because obviously in 100 shots, like you said, I have no chance to win.
Right. And we could put statistics, like if we had statistics on you, if we got you in a gym for 1,000 threes, we could sit there and say, okay, Sez hit 15% of his threes. And we put Steph Curry in a gym with nobody on him, and he hits, 60% of his threes. We could then run an expected value for you guys playing against each other if we put some kind of, if there was some kind of monetary or something on the line here that you were risking. So we could do that. But in one shot, sure, you have a chance.
Right. And I would get tremendous odds in that situation, and I'd be the better bet.
Well, now if we were talking about odds, right, that's where the EV comes in. So if you're getting 10-1 on 1 shot, let's say, well, now we could calculate, does that make sense is it profitable to bet on Sez? Okay. And then there's a whole calculation involved there. But this is the kind of logic, actually, and we're talking about a very hypothetical situation, we're not going to be shooting free throws against or threes against Steph. But this does happen in real life. And you say, a lot of times people will, I'll put a play out there. Golf is a perfect example because on a weekly basis, golf, you've got very long odds on just about every golf. The favorite in a golf tournament at best is going to be like 5-1, 6-1 generally. Okay. Tiger at his peak was a different story. He was close to even money. He was a plus 150, which is absolutely insane.
Do you remember those bets? Do you remember those bets you could take Tiger or the field?
Tiger against the field? Yeah. If you know Artie Lang from the Howard Stern show, he tells a great story about how Norm Macdonald had basically convinced him in the Masters. He's like, listen, we could take the entire field for $10,000. We've got 120 golfers, and we just got to beat this one guy. And of course, that one guy was Tiger Woods, and it was very tough to beat. So yeah, but I do weekly betting on golf, and it's a good example of this where people. You're going to lose quite a bit, but my idea is I have an expected value that is positive on what I do in golf. But yes, when I'm playing 25-1s and 30-1 shots, they're not going to win in one, just like you're not going to beat Steph Curry that one time. But if we do this enough, if you play him enough times and the odds were right, there are going to be an occasion where you hit the shot and he doesn't, and I'm going to get paid more. If 10-1 is going to be more than you should get paid for it. And that's what we're looking for. That's positive EV.
Okay. So now bring it back. So anyone that's getting into sports wagering, or it's been wagering for a short amount of time, one of the questions I always hear is like, what are those numbers? The positive, if sometimes a game has next to it says plus 150 or it says minus 285. Explain. I mean, you can use any sort of example you want. And those numbers have to do with expected value? I mean, I know those are odds, but it tie those things together.
Well, it could. Yeah, you have to use it as the bettor to calculate your expected value. But what those numbers are telling you is first you want to come up with what's my break even here at this. I think people overlook a lot of times, especially in the NFL. Most of the games are going to be minus 110. We talk about this on our other podcast. We're like, okay,
with the spread.
Yeah, against the spread, it's going to be a minus 110 juice. That's 10%. So if we were playing this with no juice, as we call it, or no vig, all these would be even. Even would be you sitting at the bar next to your buddy, and you say, "Who do you like in this Eagles game?" And he says Buffalo, and you say, "I'll take the Eagles, $10. What's the point spread?" And we do it on the point spread, and there's no juice because I'm not going to pay you juice. You're not going to pay me, and that's an even money bet. So now if we could have that type of bet with the bookie, that would be fantastic.
So why is there juice? Is that how the bookies make their profit?
That's how they make their money. Okay. So they're in business. This is they call it a spread. We call this a spread if you're trading stocks or any sort of financial product. There's a spread built in, and that's how they make their profit. They're offering you a service, and they need to get paid. So you understand why they're putting a spread on the games. Now, some bookies are going to have a tighter spread. Another thing that you're going to hear about is you'll hear 10 cents, 20 cent, there's a 10-cent spread on this. There's a 20-cent spread. What they're talking about is the difference. A lot of times this is in money lines. So you'll see a baseball game is minus 120 or plus 110. Minus 120 would be the favorite. Plus 110 would be the underdog. So, of course, you're always going to get a little less to bet the underdog, and you have to pay a little bit more to get the favorite. The spread there would be what we call 10 cents, the difference between the 120 and 10. So you're looking for, when you have a book, you're looking for very tight spreads. That means you're paying less on the juice because a minus 120 and a plus 110 is implying that the odds of this game are probably at 115. It's somewhere in the middle.
So the closer you are to zero, the closer it is to an even matchup.
Right. Okay. So, and you'll see this, and as you get future bets, money line bets that increase, you'll see the MMA. You bet on MMA. If you're betting a minus 120 favorite as opposed to the plus 110, when you get to a minus 900 favorite or a minus 1,000 favorite, as you'll see in MMA, then you may have a 200-cent spread. It might be minus 1,000 plus 800, depending on your book, or plus, the spread widens as you get higher in the as a favorite, a bigger favorite.
And why do they do this? So you can't bet both sides and you make money, right? So when you bet, I mean, is that
it's an arbitrage? Now you could with different books, and this is the advantage of either being out in Vegas where you have multiple outs. If you've got multiple online outs, whatever the case may be, it's an arbitrage. And there are, believe it or not, this is how some people, when you hear some people are professional sports bettors, not all of them are guys who are actually picking games properly. What they're doing is out there and they're picking off the market. And there are groups they do this, especially out in Vegas, and they'll run from sportsbook to sportsbook because they're getting arbitrage situations where they can take both sides of a game and guarantee themselves a profit. And that does happen. And so that's not for everybody. You need a lot of time to be able to do that. You're staring at your screens all day.
I mean, right now we're still talking to our, this is still like our tutorial. And but that's interesting because even as a novice, as a novice wagerer, that is really interesting to me. That concept is like that it goes that far. Now, explain arbitrage. What exactly is that? I've heard that term thrown around in sports wagering before, but really just break that down to a definitional. And, how does that apply to what we're talking about?
Yeah. So an arbitrage is another word for a hedge.
Okay.
And I wasn't planning totally to get into hedging. And this is another thing here that I really just want to touch on one sec. Because I hear hedging all the time in sports and in sports betting. And I just saw someone in the chats talking about how they got out of a live bet. This is all sort of coincides. Remember now, what I'm going to do for a second is go back to what we were talking about with the lines, okay? With juice and money lines, what minus 110 means, what minus 120 means. There's a simple way to do the calculation. There's a million calculators online if you don't want to do these calculations yourself. Some people could do them in their heads, but you can figure out the calculation. If it's a minus being the favorite, so minus 110, you would do it's minus. If it's a minus favorite, it's minus the number divided by 100 plus the negative number. So that may sound, when I say it, it's hard to explain, but it's essentially, if it's a minus 110, you're doing 110 divided by 210, 100 plus 110. That comes out, and it's very straightforward. And then of course, the other side of that would be if it was a plus. So if you were at plus 120, you would be doing, it's different. You do 100 divided by 120 plus 100, and that's how you come up with your break even. So that's a break even point, and that's what we call that would be the implied odds on this event to happen. So when you see that number minus whatever plus whatever, you want to figure out what those implied odds are, right? So and then you understand what the probability is of this event happening. Now, if you have a system that says, but I think this is going to happen more frequently than the applied odds, now you've got plus EV. So now you're plugging in, right? So you're going to plug into the situation. We go back to the coin flip. It's a 50-50 proposition. We know that, right? You don't have to be a statistician to know that. So we know that's 50-50. And we should be getting paid, if there was no juice, we should be getting paid even money on a coin flip. If you and I just bet $5 on heads or tails, I shouldn't have to pay you juice or whatnot. Now, we do get coin flips in the NFL, right? They do those props Super Bowl time. And why is it a bad bet? It's a bad bet because you're paying minus 110 on a coin flip. So in other words, they're telling you that this is a 52.4% probability when it's really a 50-50 probability. So they're guaranteeing themselves to make the juice, figuring they'll probably get even money on both heads and tails. I mean, there's no reason that they wouldn't.
Do they lay it off? I mean, that's another discussion. But they're going to take probably a limited amount of bets. But that's the, people make those bets all the time, and you're making, if you want to do it for fun, it's the Super Bowl. I get it, fun, but just differentiate differentiate fun and recreational stuff from actually seriously betting. When I go to the casino and I go play craps, that's my entertainment. I don't go in there. I know I try to play as smart as I possibly can, but playing smart in those games is just reducing the house edge, never flipping it in my favor. Card counting is a whole different ball game, but you're playing smart. But I know in the long run, every time I play craps,
I'm a loser lifetime. I don't have to keep numbers on it. I know I've definitely lost money, but I've also lost money going to the movies and going out to dinner and everything else. It's entertainment.
Well, it's not lost. It's
exactly
right. You're buying show tickets. You're buying movie tickets. You're paying. You're getting entertainment and value, and that's what you're talking about. Totally separate.
That's what you need to understand. So, when I go to the casino to play poker, that's with the intention of, I feel like I'm a plus, here we go. We'll use it. I'm a plus EV player. And I feel like I'm going in there with a purpose. It's more business-like, and I'm going there to win. If I'm there with some friends and I'm there with a girlfriend or whatever it is, and we're going to casually have fun and we'll play craps or blackjack or, the other table games, then we know, listen, it's fun. Maybe we'll win. The beauty of going to the casino is you can have entertainment and come home with some money sometimes. But over the long haul, you're going to lose because the odds are against you. So it's a negative EV play to play those table games.
So, John, last week we teased the listeners a little bit, and we were talking about EV, and you were about to tell an amazing story, and I cut you off and oh my God, did I get hate mail on that for cutting you off? People were like, "What the hell? I want to hear John's story." Alan, we just shut up and let him go. So, this seems like a perfect sequitur, maybe. You were talking about like the locks and plays.
So, this was a long time ago. This was early 2000s. I'm working on. I'm working on Wall Street. I had a client someone who worked for a client, and he was a big horse bettor, big gambler in general. So of course we hit it off, and we'd speak about this stuff all the time. Became very friendly. He had a friend of his, older guy, who was a professional.
So John got cut off again for a minute. He was in the middle of telling his story about locks. And that's just, by the way, another thing we're going to be doing on this podcast is at the end of each podcast, John Alesia, who is just an amazing storyteller, is going to be doing Storytime with John, with Statsational. So if it's just remember, we're going to keep this podcast usually till about 35, maybe 40 minutes tops. And just stay tuned to the end, because John's always going to have an anecdotal story about, some sort of shady thing he came across in the gambling world, or some sort of method that someone tried to cheat, and he's seen it all. He's literally seen it all. So it's he was telling me some of these stories off air, and they were just unbelievable to me. So getting back a little bit to what we were talking about with the negative EV plays and stuff like that. So that's, I think, a mistake that a lot of new gamblers and even sort of moderate and to experienced ones face sometimes. And what they do is they don't know what those numbers mean on the side, like the minus 150 and the plus 25 and the plus 250. So I think the simplest way to explain it would be that anytime you see a minus, and again, if this is rudimentary to you, it's still good to refresh and rethink about that. But anytime you see a minus next to any sort of sporting event, that usually means it's the favorite. It always means it's the favorite. And anytime that you see a plus, so if something's plus 250, that means it's an underdog. All right. So again, and when you intuitively look at the games, especially if you're a football fan or a baseball fan, it'll make sense to you. Say, hey, the better team has the minus next to their name. The underdog has the plus next to his name. So that's a good way, also a basic way to really just see and try to get and go through all the scores. I advise you, go on your favorite app and look. A lot of them now have the betting odds. If you're a mixed martial arts fan, that's the great way to do it. The person who's expected to win the fight, the man or woman who's expected to win the fight, they'll have the minus sign next to their name. And that means simply, so for example, if someone is minus 200, that means you have to lay down $200 in order to get $100 back. Statsational, here he is. He's joining us again. John, you're back.
Oh, man, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on.
You know what? You got to upgrade that internet service. Right?
No, it's like it's literally
all the subscribers. If you liking John's stories, you need to subscribe so John can
so I can pay for some 5G.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry, man.
No, it's okay. No, we were just talking a little bit more about while you were gone about underdogs and favorites. But and I was telling the people that we're going to have story time with John at the end, and we didn't lose much time there. I'm sure the listeners were thrilled to listen to me.
It becomes a cliffhanger now. So
okay, here we go. So story time with John.
I'll get you back to where we were. So anyway, again, this guy that I work with
Start from the beginning.
hooks me up with this guy. Okay, so I was working a client of mine when I was working on Wall Street, who was a big time gambler, had a friend, older gentleman, who was a pro poker player, professional sports bettor, and a big horse handicapper. So he hooks me up with this guy. This guy started a website, and he says, "Hey, you should really check out my buddy. He's really good." I said, "Okay, fantastic." So, excuse me, me and a few of my buddies, we said, "Yeah, you know what? We're going to play this guy's games." So the guy was doing fairly well, college football, NFL, and we stuck with it. Go into basketball season, and he would put his plays as like a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star play. The more stars, the more confident he was. And you'll see nowadays guys talking about units, and it's sort of a similar strategy. So, when I asked him about it, he's like, "Yeah, if it's 3 stars, I would play for basically 3 units." Fantastic, pretty simple. I could follow it. All of a sudden, one day he puts on last minute, and it was like an alert, special play. So I said, "All right, I don't know what special play means, but I'm just going to play it as if it's a regular play, and it wins." I said, "Oh, great." So the next time I get, maybe a week later, we get special play again, same team in college basketball. Play it, and it wins. This happens now 4 times until I start to realize, I'm like, I think, this guy doesn't want to say it. I said, I think they have some inside information. Like, I think special play means. So I called this, not the guy, he had a guy running the website.
So I don't mean to interrupt your story, but special play is the code for there's something going on here.
Something's going on. I wasn't smart enough like the first 2 times, but like 3-4 times in. Yeah, 3-4 times in, and I go, this special play hasn't lost yet. And there's something up. So I speak to the guy. He had a guy who was running the website for him, so he wasn't actually doing it. This guy was posting the plays. And he was. So I speak to this guy, and he doesn't want to say anything incriminating, but he says, "Listen, when we get these special plays," he goes, "generally they're going to be about 5 minutes before the game because that's when we're going to get the information." I said, "Okay, I'm ready to go." And I know it's been the same team every time, so I'm paying attention to when they play, and I'm on the computer making sure I check when these special plays are coming. I tell my buddies, and it's like, it's out of the movies. You're like, "Oh man, we're involved in some real shady stuff here. I don't know what's going on."
And it's exciting.
It's exciting. So once we figure it out 4 or 5 in, and we've made some money, and we won some money on these plays, we haven't been told this explicitly, but we put 2 and 2 together, and we say, "This is what's going on." We're like, we can't lose. We've got somehow, I don't know if the coach is, doing something to keep to shave points, as they call it. If they got to one of the players. And so we said, well, if you're going to get to the player, it's got to be their best player, and I'm forgetting the team right now. This is actually, you could actually look this up. So this actually did happen, and they got arrested, the participants involved.
Oh, what team was it?
I'm going to have to look it up. I'm forgetting now. It was like Toledo. I believe it was Toledo.
What sport was it?
It was college basketball. And the college actually kids got arrested in both their football program and the basketball program.
Well, it makes sense that it's college, since college kids have no money.
Yes. So these sort of things happen in college. So the and the guy who was giving me the games, he wasn't involved in it either. But you get in these seedy back, the word spreads quickly, and which is why legalized gambling is so important, because legalized gambling is what keeps the games and the integrity of the games much more so than when you keep it underground. When you keep it underground, the bookies, who are the bookies going to go to? They can't go to the FBI and say, "Hey, listen, I'm a bookie, and these guys are pounding me on these fixed games." But the legal casinos can, and that's what triggers most of these guys who get caught, is because the casino says, "Hey, I'm getting some unusual," like Toledo, and I think it was Toledo, but Toledo might be a different story. I'm forgetting the team. It's one of those like Midwestern small college schools.
For purpose of our story, Toledo's fine,
right? And I'll get you the right school. But what happens in Vegas, these games don't get bet very heavily. And people would be surprised, by the way, the limits that they'll put in Vegas on some of these small college basketball games.
Right. And like all of a sudden people are putting like $20,000 on like a Toledo volleyball game.
You can't, you actually can't do that just because they just don't take enough action on a Tuesday night game in the MAC. Like they just don't get enough action. So what happens is they've caught other schools this way, where they're getting an unusual amount of play on a game that's not a very prime type of game. So and then they start putting a flag on it and they start watching it and looking for signs. Anyway, back to the story. We get to now. I'm convinced we've got locks here. So I'm a little bit more conservative. Again, I told you I'm in here with my buddies and my brother's part of this as well, and we're all playing the games. So it's the story of let's take the entire bankroll and put it on this. And I'm like, well, let's we'll increase the bets, no doubt about it. I said, but let's tone it down. My brother's like, no, screw that. I'm going all out. Chips in. I'm going all out. So I played pretty significantly. It wasn't everything I had. I shoved it in, and he really shoved it in. Now, this is the days when it wasn't really, the games weren't all easily found on TV. So I had to go to you had to go to the school website, and they had their local broadcast that you could listen to, and it was a really crappy broadcast to listen to. So they're playing Nevada. I remember the other school, and why I'm forgetting the school. I know they were playing Nevada. Anyway, the way it goes is the guy who was on the take gets hurt.
Oh!
And the game, I believe he breaks his nose early in the game. And he's their best player. So the fact that he's not in the game, I'm free, and I'm listening to their local school broadcast, and they're like, he's been out and all this stuff, and we're just sitting there, and you're just staring at the game. We were just never close. Like we lose.
Wow.
So we basically lost more money than we made because we wound up betting way more than we had won on these special plays on what seemingly was a lock. So the moral of the story is there definitely was inside information because it wound up going to court, and these guys wound up getting arrested for fixing these games. So they had a fix in, yet you still lost money because even with the fix, everything has to go right. The kid could still get hurt or whatever it is. And I'm not advocating for fixing games. I think, that's not the way to go, but I'm saying when we're getting this, and I'm like, and the kid gets hurt. So there are no locks. So be careful just because and there's certainly no lock from a guy who's telling you this is the lock of the century. This is the ACC lock of the year, anything like that. They don't exist. So that was, when we were talking about locks last week. Those don't exist.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, one of my favorite podcasters and radio broadcasters, Chris Liss on RotoWire, he calls it the airplane test. And what he said was, even if there's a 1% chance, would you get on an airplane that had a 1% chance to crash? No. So yeah, you'd make a significant bet on a 99%, but you're not going to put your whole house and your kid's college fund on a 99%er. It's just you're not going to do it because that 1% chance is more significant than you think.
That's actually great. I've heard that also, and I like that a lot because it's such about perspective, right? I was talking about golf before, and we were talking about favorites in golf, and the favorite in golf might be plus 500. Let's say Bruce Koepka comes into a tournament and he's plus 500. He's the favorite, and we look at it like, oh man, like Bruce Koepka, he's the favorite. Like he's going to be really tough to beat here. He's plus 500. If you were betting MMA. And you had a plus 500 MMA guy, you'd say, oh, this guy has no chance.
No chance, right?
It's all about it's your perspective. Both guys, if we believe the market is correct, both guys had the same probability to win their event.
Yeah,
yet we look at Brooks Koepka in a different light than we're going to look at that MMA guy who's plus 500 in his event.
That's really interesting. To put it that way is really interesting. And yeah, again, it's similar to that airplane test. And there's no such thing as 100% lock. And if you thought there was, why don't you just liquidate all your assets and put it on that thing? Well, that's a great way to end it. Story time with John, man. I think this is going to be big. People, I might have to retell that story. I'm going to a family birthday party today, and there's a shady cousin. We have a shady cousin, and he loves these backroom sort of gambling stories. He's like me. He's a degenerate when it comes to these stories. So if you don't mind, I might have
no. Just be my guest, but these are great stories for the kids too. Just kind of.
Oh, I'm telling you,
great bedtime. Kids when we were fixing games back in the day.
Yeah. When I walked uphill in snow 2 ways to school.
Yeah.
All right, John. Well, you did it again. John Alesia, aka Statsational. Rundown. Give us a quick, the reason we're doing these podcasts and we're putting them out to the public is, we want to entertain you, but two, we want to urge you to come over to DFS Army's Beat the Book section. So why don't you just do a quick 30-second commercial in your own words of Beat the Bookie on DFSArmy.com, and we could tell them how they could use promo code BTB, Beat the Bookie, and get 20% off. Go ahead, John. Tell them why they should come over.
Well, obviously I'm a little biased here, but I think we do a pretty good job. We've got 4 coaches over there, including myself, who are not only just giving you what they think their best plays are. They've got models for each of the sports. We've got guys in NHL and the NBA now that has started. We'll have college basketball going. Certainly the NFL's been doing really. My NFL's been fantastic since I joined over here at Beat the Bookie. I believe 27-8-1 is the, or 20. I'm sorry, 28-1 is the record since I've been over at Beat the Bookie. So yeah, things have been going really well, and I think on more than that, it's more than just give me the games, because I think that gets a little overblown. What I really want to do is, the old adage, teach a man to fish sort of thing. So we want to be able to teach you guys how to do this for yourself, and just how to be a little bit sharper, just how to be smarter than your friends. I am the guy. I'm not smarter in. I don't know who's going to win, and that's the moral. What we're talking about. I don't have a crystal ball, but what we're trying to do when we talk about EV is we're trying to talk about put yourself in positive EV situations. So when people call, I get this all the time out of the blue. Hey, who's going to win the baseball game tonight? Generally my answer is I don't know, but there's good value on X. I don't know who's going to win, but if you play this often enough, this is a good bet. That's what I know. I don't know who's going to win. So anyone who tells you they know who's going to win is, they're not too reputable. So we're not trying to tell you who's going to win. We're trying to give you the best value and where you, over time, you should be putting your money, and then teaching you how to do this for yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. Is think of John as someone who's teaching you how to golf, how to play tennis. He can't go out in the court and make the make the hits for you, but he could show you how to position your feet, how to hold the racket, how to swing the bat a little better, so you have a better chance of making contact and putting the ball in play. I think that's I think that's a better sort of a comparison that makes sense. John, I love hanging with you. We'll do it again next week. We'll keep these going. If you want to reach out to John in the Slack chat, if you're a DFS Army member, he's in there. If you want to get him on Twitter, he's at Statsational, STATSATIONAL. It's up on the screen if you're watching the video feed. I'm at Alan Seslowski, aka Season Long Sez. You can hit me up in the Slack. I'm always in the Season Long Fantasy Football and the Season Long Fantasy Basketball. And we'll be talking a little bit more about fantasy basketball next week. Continuing on with our Geeks Vegas lines every Tuesday or Wednesday. We're going to be pumping that out with our fearless leader, the Geek. All right, John. Till next time, my brother.
We'll see you next week.
Spend wisely.